In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan Frye, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Lizzie Haynes, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome, all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Dustin Melbardis, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Bryan Frye. Bryan, say hello.
Good evening, all, from the westerly of coasts.
Good evening. Frye, last thing I tuned into the TV for was March Madness, but what are you watching nowadays?
You know, I didn't even do March Madness this year. I'm a sour individual at the state of West Virginia basketball, so I just said, "Phooey."
Well,
And then we ran
Huggins
into
is out, right?
Huggins is out, and then that I actually did watch the Caitlin Clark Iowa game against WVU girls where she dropped 32 on us and we lost by a lot. So I was just like,
Yeah.
Fine, whatever. I'm done. Next season, maybe. Sadness.
I've been watching. I
To
watched a lot more of it this year, even though I didn't make a bracket.
to answer your question of what I've been watching a lot recently, I've been watching the new Netflix television spinoff of The Gentleman, originally created by Guy Ritchie for the Matthew McConaughey, Colin Farrell movie. And now they've got a I shouldn't say television. It's a Netflix miniseries spinoff of The Gentleman. So that's kind of been my bag recently.
Does it come with a recommendation?
Only if you've seen the initial movie, which is my favorite Guy Ritchie film. I absolutely loved it. I don't think that movie could have been any better. And in 2029, you best believe it's a dealer's choice.
When it's finally time that we can watch it.
Yeah, dude.
Okay,
I have 3 or 4 movies where I'm just like it's like X's on a calendar. I'm like, I'm gonna get there.
Well, nothing's going to get in the way of this freight train because in 2029, we're still going to be sitting here doing this show. Well, speaking of shows, We've got a guest. He's got his own show coming to you from the Windy City, Chicago, and the Least Important Things podcast. It's your special guest, Luke Ferris. Say hello.
Hey, friends. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk. And you already started with March Madness and Guy Ritchie, so I know we're on a good track here.
Yeah, even though the train will be going, we'll be off the tracks very soon with Bryan and I. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the Least Important Things podcast.
So I describe it to people as if This American Life went to Comic-Con. It's a storytelling podcast about the most important of the least important things in our lives. So movies like we're talking about today, sports, the things that give us purpose and joy that really don't matter, but actually do matter. So that's anything from songs we like to walk to, how do we pick our teams that we support, and I'm doing an episode on black and white film and why it's still used today. So I wanted to throw a question immediately at you guys.
Nice.
On this topic. Why do you think directors today still use black and white in their films?
Bryan, you have an answer? I got one.
I do. The movie that shoots to the forefront of my mind, and it's a fandom piece, is Sin City. And I feel like not only did they use it in that one to convey the art of the comic book, but also to really emphasize the use of subtle color. So if your movie has the vibe in which, using a heavy sepia filter, but in this case, black and white, I feel like it really does lend an impactful level of cinematography to what they're trying to do.
I think black and white gives us a chance to focus on some more in-depth, detailed acting, especially on a close-up, on a conversation, on an embrace, or of details that you need to see because you're paying attention. And sometimes special effects or bright explosions are things that, like, is this what I'm looking for? But a movie like what we're covering tonight, we're not getting into it just yet, but that you need to pay attention to what's going on. So I find it's a tool, not a crutch. Some people might call it a crutch to be like, oh, they're just trying to cheat an atmosphere out. But instead, I think it's a tool to have it come through.
Well, and it's also, I think, something that can convey a certain level of age or even a nod to an older time. I used to give my parents crap and tell them that I pictured their childhood in black and white, and it was true. I mean, it's true. And that comes from, media. Like, they watched movies that were in black and white. So I pictured their childhood in black and white, completely Andy Griffithed out. And, just how it was. So it's also something I think that can be used to convey a vintage feel.
I like the idea that black and white is the ultimate measuring stick for an actor. It's like, you got to be in black and white. Obviously, I helped Robert Downey this year, and he was in black and white. So I guess a guy who has everything, black and white really showed his true colors, and he got an Oscar for it.
We just released, so it'll be the month before this podcast drops. We just released Young Frankenstein, done in black and white, but it did not need to be. And we had mentioned in the show that it really makes it feel like it fits in the rest of the 30s monster movies when it clearly wasn't. But it's a tool, and it's a good tool. I don't know if it's one that's thrown around by inexperienced directors too much. It's almost as if like, all right, you ready to give this black and white effort a shot? I like the payoff there.
I can only think of one director whose, I don't want to call it his mainstream debut, but his first film right out the gates was in black and white. Can you guess what I'm thinking, Dustin?
You thinking Clerks?
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's what I was thinking.
I was just about to make the comment that I don't think you can do black and white right out of the gate as you're like, here I am. But then Kevin Smith hit me in the top of the head and said, yeah, you can. So, yeah.
And he jokes about that. He's spoken about how initially, obviously, they did it for budget reasons. It was in which people don't really understand. It was like black and white film. If you were shooting on film, it was cheaper to process. It was easier. You didn't have to have extra lighting, like we talked about. You don't have to worry about color correction, all those things. You don't have to worry about props or matching color and outfits and things like that. But it's interesting. After the film was released, a writer reviewing the film said the whole point of the black and white in Clerks is that the audience sees it through an actual camera in the store, and Kevin Smith stole that and then used that for his press tour. He's like, that's brilliant. Absolutely, I did that.
That's totally why I did that.
Yeah, that's exactly why I did that.
Yeah,
thanks good sometimes.
Yeah, well, thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate that. I think my 2007 Final Cut Pro black and white filter films probably not up to the standard of what directors are using black and white film today, or this film that we're talking about today. But when it's used right, it works.
Upload them.
Oh, they'll never see the light of day. I'll make sure of that.
But hey, that's Patreon content right there.
That's true.
There you go. That's exactly what that is. Yeah, I should upload my first film. My directorial debut was Chapter 16 of the Driver's Ed book, Handling Emergencies.
Ooh,
my coach.
That's a thriller.
Course, that is a class that's definitely taught, quote unquote, by a coach. And we had to do a project. So we got in our vehicles and we showed people how to change a tire, showed people how to like counter correct from like a skid. I should have really done black and white with that. That really would have, I don't know, maybe bolstered my early directorial aims. I've got a question for you guys. In keeping with the title of today's movie, which we'll get to in a moment, what is a memorable naked movie scene, Luke?
Oh, wow.
This could be a spicy scene. This could be a funny scene. It could be a so bad you want to forget it scene.
Gosh. Obviously, like Old School is a pretty famous one.
Mm-hmm.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall is a great one with Jason Segel going full frontal. But to be honest with you guys, I'm going to be straight with you guys. I think what my most memorable was probably the first time I saw Braveheart, which was I was way too young to see it.
Same.
Sure.
It was like a rite of passage with my brother and dad, and that I saw some things as a young man that I was surprised to see.
Yeah,
I was curious to see. So that probably is the most memorable. Just to be
the most memorable, the least important things.
I'd like to hide that it's something different, but that's that's the one that comes to mind immediately. So I just got to be honest with you guys.
Well, I'm probably walking down the same path as you, Brian. What's your answer here?
I've got two. I went with most startling and favorite. The most startling was Ken Jeong in The Hangover.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I did not see that coming, and now I can't not see it coming in my head ever again. And my favorite is Ali Lauder's whipped cream bikini in Varsity Blues.
There we go. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Impressionable.
I probably saw that movie too early too, but
You know, I wasn't even thinking about this one, but you guys just brought this up. The very end, very close to the end of A Clockwork Orange, you have our protagonist kind of in a romp with two women at the end, and it's kind of a jarring, like, well, here you go, that it's just there, kind of getting a little bit of a mental state. But my choice here was kind of alongside your choice, Luke, which is Fast Times at Ridgemont High, with Phoebe Cates coming out of the water with the moving in stereo music going. It was, I mean, what else could a director want? An excuse to film a teenager's fantasy. You don't have to make it artistic. That's just what it is.
That's just, there's a lot of directors over the years that have used that, their power to just, whether to make it like connect with the film storyline, and they use it as an excuse to live out a childhood fantasy.
Yeah, more proud to him.
I mean, Revenge of the Nerds had an entire montage.
Let's go with, what is your last movie you saw, Luke?
The last movie I saw was the first Pirates of the Caribbean film. On Least Important Things, we also do rewatch series, so mini series, and where it's more of this type of conversation. So we just released the first film, Pirates of the Caribbean, and we're covering the entire franchise month by month. So we'll see how it goes. We've done this with Jurassic Park and Mission Impossible. This one is, and we try to cover franchises that are popular, but not the Marvels, the Star Wars of the worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really good rewatch. It's a great film. It's a fun action adventure film. I think when characters become so ingrained in pop culture, it's hard to see them with fresh eyes, but rewatching it, seeing Johnny Depp's portrayal of Jack Sparrow, you have to give it to him. He just is so charismatic throughout that film. And fun fact, I didn't know this in looking back and doing the research. He was nominated for an Oscar. That's leading role for Jack Sparrow. It seems silly looking back, but that first film still holds up. Now we'll get into the sequential films, and I don't think it's going to go well. But
such an impactful role to the zeitgeist of the world that you have people of certain ages who don't even know Johnny Depp before that. Like, right. That was their first. Well, speaking, you've given me permission to just grab the controls of this locomotive and go way off the rails, because we haven't even got close to this movie we're covering tonight.
We talk about nudity, naked. We're naked.
Gotta ask you guys this. Yeah. Pirates of the Caribbean is a movie about pirates. What other movies are about pirates?
So this came up in our conversation.
Oh, cool.
What my co-host Mike said, Waterworld is a pirate movie.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Time Bandits.
Time Bandits. Yeah. So we've got time pirates. We got plenty of space pirates. But as far as the things that we know in modern media, there's not that much pirate stuff. I grew up with the pirate Lego play sets. Right? Yes. And I know that Peter Pan.
What was the Captain Phillips?
There we go. Right, that's modern piracy. I mean,
This Flag Means Death, which is the HBO series. That's a TV series.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about series, Stars, Black Sails.
Well, if we're going to talk about the things out of the movies, then we know that Assassin's Creed Black Flag is great. But as far as pirate movies, there aren't that many.
Yes,
that's right.
There's an opera, Pirates of Penzance. So what I'm getting at is there's an entire generation of people, I believe. This is my little thread here. It's an entire generation of people who their introduction to pirates was Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right.
It's meaning that there are some people who might attribute pirates to a general group of, they're undead. Pirates are scary because they're ghosts or zombies or skeletons. When that particular movie is about, ghost pirates, but how would they know anything else? Unless you're talking about Muppet Treasure Island. But like that's the thing is, it was such an impactful series, Luke, that there's probably people that, because they were young when they saw it, they think, oh, when I think of pirates, I think of ghosts.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Are we not counting like every good and bad Peter Pan movie
that's
they've made in the last
too,
20 years?
Is that Peter Pan has pirates, but the movie isn't about pirates.
No.
It's not a
and outside
pirate.
of Treasure Island or Swiss Family Robinson is another one, but
There we go.
it's not.
Yeah.
Swiss Family Robinson isn't about pirates. Their main feature, the villain, but it's not a pirate.
Right.
It might be an unfair question because there might be a lot of things that are pirate adjacent that we've always counted, and maybe it just wasn't until Pirates of the Caribbean that we got a big, impactful franchise, and then the next 20 years full of awesome series and stuff like that. But now, veering the train back to the track, Bryan, what's the last movie you saw?
Oh, I went back. I've done this a couple times since the Super Bowl, but I think I watched Twister again in preparation for Twisters.
Yeah, just getting that nostalgia back.
Man, watch that movie a lot on TBS Superstation.
Yes.
It's a movie I could start it in the middle. I could start it 15 minutes till the end. I could start it from the beginning. It doesn't matter where I see it or how I see it. And if I feel like it, I'll start it from the beginning. It's a rewatch classic. Like I could watch it once a week.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's role in that is so great. I mean, he's great in everything, but he's so good.
It's actually the movie, right? It is the movie that introduced me to Philip Seymour Hoffman. I followed him after that, and he is on my top 3 list of actors who passed away that really affected me in a massive way, like super lost the film.
No, it's high praise. Yeah, and I haven't seen that movie in a while. Most memorable thing about that is I went to Universal Studios as a little kid, and the Twister walkthrough experience was something that my mom had to carry me out because it scared me so bad. I was fine with Jaws, I was fine with King Kong, but Twister was whoa.
It was real. It was too real.
Got to get out of there. Well, I'm bringing a movie that I just most recently watched that is not a recommendation, and I even told my friend, "Don't watch that movie," but he put it on anyway. Holmes and Watson. The John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell retelling of Sherlock Holmes. That movie wasn't any good.
Yeah,
I
skipped
refused.
Good.
I did.
Good. You guys made the right choice.
Yeah.
If it's on, you won't be offending yourself. You won't feel bad for laughing at some of the stuff. But based on the bar that those guys have set, this one's way, way, way below. So don't watch that movie. But we have a movie we do want you to watch. Bryan, what are we covering tonight?
We will be doing Naked City.
From 1948, starring Barry Fitzgerald, Howard Duff, Dorothy Hart, and Dawn Taylor. This movie was, before we have good box office numbers, but we do still have ratings for it. A 7.6 on our IMDb. Our Rotten Tomatoes is a critics' tomato meter of 86%. And the audience score is 79%. So that's pretty good. It wasn't the number 1 movie that year. In 48, it was The Snake Pit. But this movie did take home 3 nominations and 2 Academy Award wins for Best Cinematography in Black and White for William H. Daniels and Best Film Editing for Paul Weatherwax. We got nominated for a couple BAFTAs as well. And then it has found its way on a bunch of AFI lists, but not any lists of note. But I will say just in total, we're looking at 14 different lists. So people know this movie and give it its deference for hitting a lot of different, we'll say, categories or genres of the things that people hold dear. So I'll start with our guest, Luke. Have you seen this before?
I have not. And this movie, and I'm so glad we're covering it tonight because this all started last summer when I watched a movie that had been on my Letterboxd watch list for many, many years called The Third Man, which you guys recently covered.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me into the film noir genre. Now, I've kind of flirted with it. Obviously, the more neo-noir, modern noir films that we know about, Sin City, Blade Runner, those type of films I knew about and knew the genre. But I bought this book from Tashin. It is a film noir coffee table movie book. It totally engrossed me into the entire genre of film noir and absolutely loved it. So The Naked City was on the list. It's in this book and they talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was super excited to dive in and have an excuse to watch it. So thank you guys. But I highly recommend the Tashin Film Noir book. you want to learn more and you're interested in film noir, it gives you everything. It gives you the best list and has some great photos. So I know listeners can't see it, but there's a great behind the scenes photo of this film being shot in New York City. It's just spectacular.
Did the book set you up with any expectations for the movie?
I knew this film was innovative from a cinematography standpoint, but they have a separate category. They kind of break down all these categories of noir films. Femme fatale, you have more of the caper films, and this is under the category of docu-noir, where a noir film either uses real life footage or they actually shoot practically on location, which to today's standards, like, okay. But back then, shooting on location was such a big deal. And to shoot as much as they shot on this movie, it's super impressive. So I had that kind of background, and I was really excited to see how it looked. But I was surprised how much I actually just enjoyed the plot outside of how visually.
Yeah, Bryan, what about you? Was this new to you?
Yep, this is a completely new one. And in fact, I think last time I really did a deep dive into Apple, when you click on one noir movie and you're like, oh, I'm going to watch this. Then it gives you like 9 more underneath it. I realized what a deep rabbit hole film noir really was during really the 30s, 40s, 50s, and on for that matter. But this is kind of like I feel like crime noir was a genre not unlike comedy would be today. Like, it's something that there was always something in the box office that fell into this genre, or action. You know what I mean? Like, this was the vein of a certain type of movie that was always present in the box offices during, the middle of the century. So, I wish I could dedicate like 2 months just to just sitting down and be like, all right, I'm going to do nothing but watch 10, crime noir movies today.
Really easy to watch, which I love. They're usually under 90 minutes or around 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm getting older. I like a slower paced movie. I'm a little bit more interested in the plot. It's just a nice, comforting, like Saturday morning, Sunday morning, grab a cup of coffee, maybe eggs and bacon, and just kind of like go throughout your day. It's just a good setting, good environment.
I like so many things of what you guys just said, but I'm going to start with what the most recent thing was, which is why are we spending time talking about things being a popcorn flick? I like the idea of the Sunday morning eggs and bacon flick. I like that a lot. But Bryan, what you said about these, like the rabbit hole of film noir and like it kind of being a genre at the time, I'm thinking to myself, like, people love their stories. And when we were a kid, and it's still going on, but like the joke was, the person's like the housewife staying at home or whatever, or your auntie like watching her stories, soap operas, is that movies being made to tell a story. It doesn't have to be a fantastic one. It just needs to be a story, and that's good enough. A little Penny Dreadful novel or a little pulp novel. Like, this is kind of all you need. So, and that's a comforting thing to be like, oh, this is a story, not necessarily the Wolfman is back. It's, oh, these are people doing people things. So did you have any expectations for what this, like, were you tipped off as to what this movie was or to its impact on film, Bryan, before? Or did you come in just like, all right, I'm here for a story to be told?
It was a really refreshing take. Like you said, it was, kind of a documentary style fictional, story. But so that twist on it was great. I really enjoyed that. But I think one of the things where movies like this come into play in my life is I keep finding ones that I really like. And now I used to muse that I couldn't wait until, my kids grew up or my kid grows up a little bit. Maybe she has kids of her own. And I get to be that, like, oh God, granddad's watching his shows again. and it's not, and I used to think, okay, it's going to be like X-Files, and it's going to be, I was like picking out what the John Wayne Westerns were for me and my parents and grandparents, what my things were going to be that I'm going to be annoying the crap out of my family with. And then I see stuff like this and I was like, man, I'm going to have both. I'm going to end up with the really old movies. I'm going to have, intermediate range movies. I'm just going to be driving them nuts with the entire pantheon. And it's going to be brutal for my kids and grandkids.
You know those days in school where the teacher or the coach would wheel in the TV on the stand?
Happiest days of my life.
I look forward to, Bryan, with your collection of physical media. In order to share any of this stuff with your grandkids, you're gonna have to essentially go up the scaffold to your VCR or your DVD player or your Blu-ray player. Let me get this down and let me show you. We used to use cables to plug things into physical screens and show them how you would watch these movies.
Although I do not put it past me to do that, I have also not ever been shy on repurchasing a specific media in the new available format just to keep it current. And I am exceedingly lazy. I have 100% spent $4.99 on a movie on Apple, whatever, just so I didn't have to go upstairs and dig through a CD wallet trying to find my copy.
Well, my sole responsibility in that collective global effort of preserving movies the way that they were, and we covered it on the show, is that I need to find the coveted Laserdisc version, the Dimension Films version of Legend of Drunken Master 2. The only ones that have the right subbing and the right dubbing, because the streaming versions you find are the bad ones. And our co-hosts, Russell and Chad, found out that this movie is vastly made worse if you watch the worst version of it. So I gotta find those things and preserve them. As far as
I'll tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll tell you another thing that comes from owning physical media, especially if you get your hands on stuff that really was made back in the mid to late 90s when DVD first came out. I have a copy of Goldeneye that still plays all of the opening previews before you even have the option to skip to the home screen.
Best.
So it's one of those things that I covet that to a certain degree because, that's fun. And then I even have a couple DVDs, Final Fantasy Spirits Within and Gladiator, the original printings on both of those DVDs. They have hidden gag Easter eggs on the discs. So my Gladiator has a hidden Easter egg of Chicken Run, where they make Chicken Run's preview Gladiator is like the egg that became a chicken, the chicken that would start an uprising. And then my
little icon would flash on the screen, and you got to press OK.
There was so much of that. There was so much of that.
Yeah, and that's fun. And DVDs don't do that anymore. None of them. I mean, they may have a tab saying special features, watch a preview or something. But the OG stuff, they were like, nah, you don't get to escape this just because you spent $50 on a DVD. Watch all these previews before you can watch.
I love
your
it.
film.
It's a time capsule. You can do this is what was hot in 2002. I just watched actually Pirates of the Caribbean on a VHS. My friend had a VHS copy.
Yes.
Awesome.
Look at all these Jerry Bruckheimer movies that Disney was making. Beautiful.
And I don't have a VHS player any longer, but I still held on to 2 or 3 VHS tapes from my collection back in the day, just out of posterity. And it was Bad Boys. It was my first rated R movie that I conned my grandparents into buying for me when I was way too young for it. There was a movie, it was a kind of a techno rave movie called Groove that I absolutely loved watching when I was younger. And Hackers.
Of course
we've covered as a dealer's choice. So, just some little keepsakes, even though I don't have anything to play them on anymore. I just couldn't bear to get rid of them.
Well, I'm going to answer my own question here, which say, I never saw it before, had no expectations. Movie's nearly 80 years old. And so there's not really much for me to compare to. And ladies and gentlemen, we are 30 minutes in and haven't even got to the ad break.
Here
we
That
go.
is what you get.
This is what I like. This is what we're here for.
When Bryan and Dustin are hosting, and it sounds like Luke is fully on board this train without tracks.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to do a brief message from our friends. And then after that, Bryan is going to reveal the plot of The Naked City from 1948. So if you haven't seen this movie, go pop in your VHS or your DVD, your Blu-ray, your Laserdisc, and then come back and listen to our companion piece for it. See you on the other side.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason. And this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies, the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
And we are back. This is your final warning. Bryan is about to spoil the plot of The Naked City from 1948. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it. But if you have and it's time to listen, Bryan, take it away.
The movie starts with a pseudo-exposition about the pulse of a city. That city is New York. And there was a murder. 2 men kill a beautiful young woman, then one of the men kills the other one and dumped him into the river. We are treated to a snapshot of the home lives of a few of our detectives before they are called in on the case of the deceased woman. Now they are on the case, the everyday grunt police work starts to unfold as the actors and the narrator take you through the beginnings of doing an actual homicide. You're introduced to Frank Niles, a big and small-time liar they are able to flesh out. Ruth Morrison, Frank's fiancée, who once worked with the deceased, Dr. Lawrence Stoneman, who prescribed the deceased sleeping pills, and J.P. McGullicuddy, a fake name the police use for an unnamed party. A floater in the river and a cigarette case that Niles sells draws a flimsy connection to the case, and a jewelry heist scheme comes to light. A case in which nearly all the suspects are involved. They find a connection between the stolen jewelry and Niles. When they go to confront him, they find he was in the process of also being murdered. A lighter in his possession leads them back to the doctor, who, after Niles' confession, fills them on the robbery scam. The floater in the river leads Detective Halloran to the killer, Willie Garza, who manages to disarm him, and a manhunt ensues. They catch up to him at a bridge where, after a shootout, Garza is shot several times and ultimately falls to his death.
Yeah, kind of an action-packed last 20 minutes of finding our guy, chasing him down, with the narration still going. Like, hey, hey, calm down, don't run so fast. You got to blend in. There is so much of the slow burn of working a homicide case and meeting all of the principals that we're going to be sort of talking to, getting information from, before we culminate in, all right, the guy's on the run, we got to get him. And to throughout the whole thing, and Bryan, even as you described sort of the happenings and the workings of the city as described by our producer, the narration goes through the whole time. So, Luke, I'll kick this over to you. The narration in this movie has got to be something that we address first. So how did it impact your enjoyment of watching it?
I think it's the thing that probably ages this movie the most, although I do find it delightful and humorous. Especially the intro feels very much like the modern Tom Cruise talking before the movie starts. Like, this is a picture that was filmed in New York. Real people, real lives. Like that's. Yeah. I hope you enjoy it. It's basically Tom Cruise telling us, like, thanks for watching Maverick and being in the theaters. So it definitely took me out of it a little bit, because when I look at the story, if you take away the narration, if you just like shot for shot the characters, I think every Law and Order episode ever filmed, ever created, has its lineage back to the Naked City. Like, this is just the foundation for every Law and Order script, scene, shot, style. That's how I felt immediately. I was like, if you put dun dun at the start instead of the narration, you'd be like, oh, this is it's a great Law and Order episode.
Yeah, and it is interesting that you said it ages it, because I think that's true, but I also still think it's still unique among most. And it's not something that I would generally say that the movie required, but it is something that enhanced its sort of cultural stability into like what it was meant to do. Bryan, when you were met with this sort of producer's voice telling you about, now this is a movie that audiences you're probably not used to, the first thing I thought was like, okay, wow, this is maybe a little bit of hubris.
Yeah, show not tell, isn't that like? Don't tell us. Like, yeah. You're gonna love this movie.
And Mark Hellinger is the voice of the narrator. But was it a little bit of a shock to you, or give me your experience on this narration, just its presence and its lingering throughout the entire film?
I think with a movie like this, at least for me, it's easy to come into with a clean palette and kind of just be game for whatever they're throwing at me. I will say this, that even with that piece at the beginning, there was really only one other time where the narration took me out of the story a little bit. And it's kind of the humor, like, oh, not that way,
Hellinger,
Gaza. Like,
you're struggling.
yeah.
Oh,
So I was just kind of like, yeah, you didn't really maybe need that part, but you know what I mean? Like everything else, well, I was pretty much game for.
There was something else that was sort of peripheral to the narration, which is not all of our. Occasionally, we are given the thoughts or the sort of inner voices of the people on screen that is not being narrated. It's presented as if, oh, this is what they're thinking. Like who's listening to this radio show? Nobody but my wife. Or, why does this have to be, of all the 8 o'clock a.m. and 7 o'clock a.m. babies, why'd you have to be a 6 a.m. baby? The two women standing outside of the store looking at that. Can you picture me in that dress? I can't imagine.
Yeah, the kids. Yeah, the kids too. Yeah, it's interesting that they add that. Did you guys think they did that because of the audio challenges? Was that part of like
an
ADR thing? Like,
I don't know if it's true of the two women in the window, but I actually thought that based on what I'd read about the movie, they just left some real people doing real stuff in the film. So I think the kids were just kids being kids, and he kind of ad-libbed grabbing one of them, being like in front of a police station. Like,
yeah.
So I kind of chalked some of these like some of these natural moments to actually being natural, what was happening on the city at the time.
Mm-hmm. And the narration really does follow. It follows the city first. Then it follows our Lieutenant Dan, by the way. It wasn't until my second watch of this, and I'm like, wow, this guy's an actual Lieutenant Dan. But our Dan Muldoon, it follows him. It follows Halloran, both at his work and at his home. But would you say, I mean, this is almost like a too easy of a question, but this is maybe the strongest case of the New York City as its own character, Luke. And it's kind of rammed down our throat.
Oh, yeah. From the beginning, New York City is a character. The shots of the DJ, the radio DJ, even further down in the movie, the root beer lady at the Five and Dime that offers root beer to Halloran. You really feel like you're seeing all these characters in New York. So it is a character because you're trying to figure out a murder, and then eventually it's a chase within New York. So it is a living, breathing character that the cops have to interact with.
Yeah. And I guess this is as good a time as any, Bryan, to talk about this filming in New York. And there might be the challenges of the time of making that work instead of on giant sets in Hollywood. But I found, and maybe it was because the narrator told me just how special it was, but I thought,
you're gonna love this picture.
Our actors are really on the streets.
This is what you're looking for.
Yes.
Best of the year.
But
follow my finger.
Maybe this is something where I actually like bought into what he was saying, is that I actually felt like we really were running around on these streets. What about you, Bryan?
This film did a remarkably good job at showing you how important and immediate solving a case was, and absolutely drowning that in the tedium of actually trying to solve it. Like I was never bored with what was going on, but the actors conveyed the tedium, and you can call it a montage in a way of them going in different places. Clearly it took hours upon hours longer to visit every jewelry store, to visit every haberdashery, and try to find where the pajamas were. You could never do something like that today. And they towed a really fine line between showing tedium but not making you feel tedium. And I just really applaud them for that.
in my entire life, I'm generally an anti-shortcut guy. However, this was like an artistic shortcut, because why go through the bother of writing the dialogue of exactly what a scene between the druggist and Halloran would be to learn the name Dr. Stoneman? But it does get us through the tedium well. Luke, do you think that this is, because I don't think it dragged either. I don't think I found myself bored either, but it really did nail down like, hey, this takes time.
Yeah, that's what you want. You want to feel the pain. I think about when Muldoon, one of my favorite scenes is when Muldoon and Halloran are in their office and they're just kind of sitting there and kind of like Halloran's just messing with the
That's
lamp.
right.
And Muldoon's like playing with his pipe, and just like just kind of that tedious, like the frustration of the work. I think the editing of the film is really strong. It feels modern, especially at the start where that montage is happening, and just the editing throughout the film is fantastic. It doesn't feel, even a lot of the films of that era, a lot of dragging shots. There's a lot of just like straight on theater style cinematography where you're holding on a conversation. Maybe you have one or two cuts to close ups, but it's really more theatrical style editing. This did not feel that way at all. And I think that goes to both the characters, the acting, the direction, and then the editing flow. But you definitely sense the pain and frustration. It goes back to the end of the film where, hey, this was 5 cents a day paper story, for a week. Now it's gone.
Yeah.
And I think that is the cool thing, is it really shows you that this was just one story within the city has a bigger story. But it could be. It's a heavy case, as Muldoon says. It's a heavy case, but it's just one of many.
Yeah, in 8 million people, which, by the way, as of 10 years ago, Manhattan by itself was 8 million people. So, I mean, the city has just grown and grown and grown.
I'll also I'll toss this in out there that when you show the succinct snippets of the different detectives walking the beat and doing the grunt work and everything, I'm not sure if you could make that work in a different style crime movie other than noir. Like, I feel like that only works in this specific genre, because if you try to do it in a grittier, film, it would seem to, like, there's a little bit of, I don't want to call it comedy, but there's a little bit of lightheartedness when you do the da-na-na-na-na-na, doing this, that, and the other, and it only works in this genre. It wouldn't work in a grittier crime film.
Yeah, there's a lot of humor in this film too, and I think Muldoon is a jovial. Again, going back to Jack Sparrow character, like, he's a character that just totally steals every frame, every time Fitzgerald is acting. His quips, his line, his demeanor. He's the old man on the force, and that's why it's a great pairing of characters, because you have the young buck and kind of the old savant, wise Yoda. One of my favorite lines that he says at the start is, "I haven't had a hard day's work since yesterday." You have like all these old, like, reminds me of my grandparents. You have all these old Irish sayings,
right?
I'm like, I felt like my grandpa was talking to me. God rest his soul. But it's just like it's so captivating every time he's on screen, and fun, and that's why it doesn't feel slow.
I think he says something along the lines of, I think it's Ruth asks him, "Why did you say that thing about the connection?" And he says, like, "Well, you just let me earn my salary today." Like, that's just like, let me do my job.
Yes, I love that. Just trying to let me do my job, man.
And so I want to get into the acting, but before we leave the editing part, there's these small extras, almost just these very small, or like featured extras, because they have one line or so, but there are a lot of ins and outs of, I would say that we maybe have 6 important cast members, but we have 20 of them that we see multiple times, and they all have, you can tell, maybe it's because of this docu-noir style, that Muldoon has relationships with 5 or 6 of these other guys. One of them, the chief medical examiner that they have to take their time to wait to get to the scene, is telling him something interesting, and Halloran asks maybe a naive question, and the medical examiner looks over to him and says, "Is he new?" Yeah. And you can tell these guys know each other. And he is not in the rest of the movie at all. And that's fine. Root Beer Lady isn't in the movie the rest of at all. But her moment where she's describing, "Oh yeah, Willie, the harmonica player, all the kids love him, whatever."
These are collections or something?
Yeah. And he just kind of like waves her off.
It's a great point. It reminds me of Jaws a little bit too, where Jaws used real life people on the island, and you have these small little characters that interact with Chief Brody, but they maybe aren't in the movie a lot, but they have these small, beautiful moments that really ground the film in the area on the island.
Well, and I think that some of these smaller 30-second characters that are in just to do one or two things are delightful, and I didn't even think about their impact on the movie, especially with editing. Of their small amount of screen time until we get to talking about the movie. I didn't think about that at all. In fact, what it made me think of is there are some characters that have a lot of screen time that I was maybe a little confused about. So I'll toss this up to either of you. This movie is pretty male driven, but we do have our Ruth character, Ruth Morrison, played by Dorothy Hart. Because I watched the movie twice. She is kind of alongside Frank Niles. She worked with Miss Dexter, but she's the daughter of the socialite. She's in it a lot, but I had a hard time placing her real impact on whether this story went the way it was going to go or not. Am I off here, or I just didn't see her impact really?
No, I think the most powerful female character isn't even on screen because she's dead.
Yes.
So I think your assessment is right, where Ruth gets lost a little bit in the story. She looks great, looks gorgeous, and has awesome outfits, but she gets a little bit lost.
I have a little bit different take on this. I think Ruth is giving us all of the embodiment of victimization that you don't get from your deceased.
There we go.
So the deceased was a bad guy herself. So it detracts, in the end, it detracts some from her victimhood, the fact that she was a bad guy. Whereas Ruth is the truest form of victim in this, where she's literally getting played by her friend, by her fiance. She's finding out about it. Her mom thinks it's hilarious. And I mean, she's a great character. She's really conveying the emotion of being a victim that you're not getting from, the initial victim who's not on the screen, that turns into a bad guy, a bad person in the end.
That's a great point. I never even thought of that, but it makes total sense. And as a viewer, we're not sure if the deceased is good or bad. They're dead. We're kind of like meant to believe that it's something bad happening to them, or they were a victim, like you said, which they were killed. But we don't know at the start if they were in shady business or not.
And also, let's also look at this with the style of like the docu-noir, and this goes in chronological order. There's not a single flashback. That's a tool to say, take that out of your bag.
Right.
Go ahead and fix that without your channel locks. Like, I'm out of a job. So the idea is, you don't get a chance to see what happened before. There is no Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, like where we get to see her going about her day. No, we don't get that. And so I think that was where, Bryan, your point of like, we need to have some feel of there are forces that are working, that are nefarious forces here. And so in total, we have jewel theft. So we have thievery, and some of that leads to our tips at pawnbrokers and stuff that get to the solving of the case. We do have murder, but this is all done by these other gentlemen, Willie Garza, and help me with the name of the other guy, the guy who's sort of whacked in the first 5 minutes. I'm
blanking on his name.
I'm trying to remember it.
Is that Pete Bacalus?
Yeah, Bacalus. Or Bacalus. Yeah. Did either of you two watch this a second time?
I didn't watch it a second time.
But Bryan, you did.
I took some screenshots, though.
I actually put it...
That this is, the stuff you're introduced to in the order you're introduced it to upon second watch is like, ooh, this is... The foreshadowing that you may have missed is there, or the character interactions that I missed the first time are there. The first time I watched it, I'm looking at this sort of documentary series like style where I'm thinking that we are in the middle of seeing 8, 9, 10, 11 small just New York City stories and New York City people. I didn't even realize that the guy that gets hit in the head, the guy who's boozed up gets hit in the head and dumped in the river, are the same people that were just up in the room. Now, is that the fault
Right.
of the filmmaker? Probably not. I just wasn't paying attention close enough because I don't know, maybe I was stuck in homework mode or something. But there's a lot of stuff that's given in this movie that, oh, okay, based on the order, it makes sense. We actually see our Garza several more times throughout the movie. He is outside of the station. What's that great line that Muldoon says when Ruth walks away? Very pretty girl.
Maybe 7.
Very pretty girl. Nice, lovely long legs. Keep looking at him, as he tells his guy to tail her.
I keep looking at him.
And then Niles is being tailed out as well. And that maybe 7 you're talking about, Brian, is that's where we get our Garza looking on. So I brought all this up to talk about our two bad guys here, or I guess the ones who are really the muscle. We covered No Country for Old Men with a huge focus, independent focus on our bad guy. I'm going to spoil my change one thing right away. I'd love to have more focus on Garza before the last 22 minutes. What do you think about this, Luke?
I think that is a great assessment because Ted Corsia, who I actually just watched in The Killing, which is Kubrick's kind of noir era film, one of his early films, and he's great in that. It definitely charismatic. I wonder, as a modern viewer, because he was pretty well known at the time, if that would have impacted your viewing because you get glimpses of him. Like if that was I'm trying to think of like a modern version of that. If that was, let's say, Matthew McConaughey's playing a bad guy, like if you just saw glimpses of him and he's brought in at the end of the film more, maybe that would have worked better for modern audiences. But he's a great character. I would have loved to see more of him, like because he's just so dynamic and looking great in that linen suit and hat. Oh man, just swagger for days.
Yeah, and he is pointed out. You know, he's from two different directions, from Halloran's legwork and Muldoon's sort of intellectual work. Brian, can you go more into the process of working a homicide that led us to the end? Because this movie is not about its final chase. It's not. It's nice. It's a nice ribbon, but it's not about that. Like we mentioned, it's kind of more about the process of getting there.
There's a line I'll paraphrase from one of my favorite crime miniseries ever, True Detective Season 1, where Matthew McConaughey is talking about the detective process. He goes, "You never know what that one thing is going to be that makes or break a case." And he's, doing that Southern drawl and everything. And he's talking about, it's going to be something small. And, you've got these detectives making maybe, these thin leaps between things, and you never know what's going to end up, and then they kind of snag a hold of something. And I forget what the line he says, where he's like, he had some quip about, it's like, "Get ready, gentlemen, this case is taken off," or something. I can't remember what he said about it, but it was one of those things where it's like, oh, they're bouncing these things off one another. Then all of a sudden one of them says, "Well, how about this?" And they're like, "Oh, well, this angle and that angle and this angle." And I love that. Like, I was never a Law and Order watcher, any of them. Like I've seen the show, but I wasn't I've seen every episode of Law and Order. It really wasn't.
Yeah, you can't have missed it, but there are fans and there are people that are aware.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's hotel fans, like on at a hotel.
Yeah,
that's exactly. Kind of what I'm.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
all it's on.
I enjoy something like this far more than I enjoy something like that because it's not formulaic. And that's what's more important about this. And I do think that they did, again, it ties into their ability to show tedium mixed with excitement, because there are a series of, we're going to lull you to sleep just to bring you back up. And you're like, we've got to break in the case. And you're like, yeah. So that the tempo, I would call it the tempo of this movie, is very good about building to small crescendos that lead you to the actual climax of the movie. And none of them are staggering. Like, none of them, it's not like, oh, there's the early movie climax, then you have the middle of the movie, dun dun dun, and then you have the fighting back to where you were before for the climax. Like, this was a very even tempered film that kept you on a nice little EKG until really hitting you with an exclamation point.
Yeah, I think the narrator says, "Ever try to catch a murderer?" has its depressing moments.
That's good.
Right.
I love the way you described it as EKG because there really is no shortage of new information every couple of minutes. What's really interesting are our chance encounters, our surprise enter the room at the same time as someone else, and the special way, and this is where I want to kind of transition into the acting a bit, our special way that Howard Duff lies. But boy, that is a liar. You are the biggest and most brash liar I've ever met after 38 years on this squad. Luke, tell me about this
The biggest
performance
and most
or
willing
not.
lie I've ever met.
That's it.
He's great. And I can say this because I think I have a similar feature. He's got a great punchable face. And just he's annoying from the get-go. He does a great job. I love him as a character because even I think his apartment, there was like swords and muskets like hung up, just like a real grade A douche. Like just like that guy.
The accoutrements of an apartment of someone who maybe served overseas, only this guy very clearly lied about serving.
He didn't. Yeah, like and it's a great, that's a great piece of information because I think we can see it as modern lens and be like, yeah, like what a kind of a slime ball. But like back then when this film was made, like right after the war, to say like I'm lying that I didn't fight in the war, that's a big deal. Like right away you're like, this guy's a slime ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that there's actually, I think at the time there was a law against lying that you were in the service.
Oh, really? I mean, I'm sure that makes sense.
I want to say that there was it was one of those like, we're not going to bust you on this. It's probably a misdemeanor or something like that. But yeah, I believe at the time there was a law against lying that you were in the war.
I really just like how Muldoon immediately is like on him, but it goes back to that police work thing where like Muldoon knows he's a snake, but
sure,
it's that idea of due process. Like you have to have physical evidence. Like there's something more there, and he's got to work the slow burn and really make sure to do that thorough police work to catch the liar
and
in his trap.
He does a really good job at putting him at ease. Like, yeah, he's putting the screws to him. His alibi comes back clean. I guess you're off the hook. No problem. Yeah. Anything else I can do for you, officer? I'm happy to help. Let him go. And then he goes, follow him 3 shifts, 2 men a time, this whole thing. And that serves its purpose too, because he wouldn't have bought a plane ticket if he thought he was still being watched. He wouldn't have sold the cigarette case if he thought he was still being watched. So he has that very smooth sleight of hand to go from, I'm putting the screws to you, trying to get you to trip up. Oh no, you're fine, bud. You're all in the clear. Let's, and then immediately puts him back at ease.
There is something that even the Law and Order shows sometimes get wrong for dramatic effect. And I'm not wrong. I don't want to let my past life in criminal justice come into it because I don't care for that life anymore. But the idea is there's very fine line between interrogation and coercion. And when you can, it's always fantastic in the Law and Order type shows of what intimidation looks like and what coercion really is. And so Muldoon has he's written in such an artistic way to feel like he's experienced in doing this. He's not flying off the handle. I believe he does grab him by the shirt collar once, but that's pretty tame. And is using all the resources at his disposal to get the information that he needs. He learns about the alibi. He has the one detective who shows up to tell him that, like, yeah, this guy has defaulted on all of his debts. He's kicked out of his university club. This guy's business, it's a sham. And all of this stuff comes in, and it kind of, you are put at ease yourself with Muldoon on the case. Then we kind of juxtapose this with Halloran, who I'm just going to describe to you guys. He's just a guy. He's not our hero, wouldn't you say?
No, but it builds stakes immediately, especially when he goes home and his wife. I like those two together, like Mrs. Halloran, beautiful. Like she took my breath away. I was like, these two need their own spin-off TV show because they've got chemistry for days. Like, I mean, you could feel the sexual tension. Like, they couldn't show it back then, but it was like, I was like, wow, these guys are having a great life. But you see him, he's kind of like the all-American guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's the guy.
Sure.
I honestly was surprised he wasn't killed in this film.
I was
expecting him. I was expecting him to get killed. I was like, oh, this is all set up for him to get killed,
or at least hurt,
severely hurt.
Yeah, All American's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Oh, he's no stranger to walking the beat. He walked halfway across Europe with a with a backpack and a gun.
Yeah,
you're I think in the movie he's 26 years old. That's what he's supposed to be. And he had been a beat officer for a while, only been a detective for a little bit. He's doing the legwork. We get to see all that legwork. But I do think it's Muldoon's party to run, and it's pretty neat. Niles the liar. Ruth is where I'm saying, yeah, she's showing the victim part here. But that's when we get to I guess our linchpin here, the big piece of information that changes. A character you had already met, portrayed by House Jameson here. Dr. Stoneman.
Well, I actually had a different thing that kept cropping up in my head every time they brought him back in.
Yeah.
Did you guys watch 30 Rock?
I did.
Where he's Dr. Spaceman.
Dr. Spaceman, yeah. Dr. Leo Spaceman.
Every time. Yeah. Every time they brought Stoneman in, I was like, it's Dr. Spaceman.
Were both of you surprised that Stoneman was implicated the way that he was? Because his first interaction on screen is, I would say, extremely convincing. As
I feel like this is old school, so this probably is where they all got it from, or close. But it's always the dude. You're always introduced to the guilty party. Now, how big or small that introduction is. So, no, it didn't shock me a bit because you got to have that aha moment that he was a part of it. Now, they even tempered that a little bit by making him basically a not an unwilling participant, but coerced in a way. It's not like he was the mastermind of everything. He just ended up being the connecting piece that put them all together.
No, he was played. He did say something when he was first introduced. I don't know if this was a saying, but I think Muldoon's asking him about the deceased and her temperament, and he said she needed a good spanking. I don't know if you guys remember that line. I don't know if that was like a saying of like she needed like a kick in the butt, to get her life back together. But I was like, oh, that has not aged well. So maybe that was a little bit of a sign.
One of my favorite things about old movies is old phrases that might have been like well known or might not have been, and there's no way we can know. From It Happened One Night just months ago, I have tried my hardest to fit in a phrase that I've tried to commit to memory. Is that like, a dame like that always figures to end up behind the 8 ball. Is that I'm trying to fit that into my work life somehow.
Yes,
but that she needs a spanking, I think, was more of a she needed help. We prescribed her, she needed a stimulus to get up, and she needed sleeping pills to go to bed. She needs some chemical help. But
I did think his dramatic reveal was well done. Like, it wasn't overly acted or like this big. You actually saw real stakes. Like he's like relieved almost.
Yes,
because he's so caught up. Because he kind of fell in love with this woman, and he's relieved. Then he's embarrassed about what he's losing. Now, some people might think it was a little over dramatized, but I actually really liked that as like a reveal where he was not the mastermind. He was used as well in this whole plot.
So they talk about in the movie them using Spaceman as a intro to get into different high society places.
Right.
This was a time where your status really dictated what you can and cannot do in a place like New York. So I feel like, especially when you talk about, shows like Mad Men and where status is really very important, and it still is in New York to a certain degree, except I believe that every walk of life is learn to adapt to whatever their I'm not going to go to a high society New York bar just because that's not what I'd be into anyway. So, but at that time where status is always, you're always looking up, or if you're at the top looking down, you have the stock market crash, how many people committed suicide based on the fact that they were utterly ruined and couldn't live poor. Mm-hmm. So when he started to think about, losing his practice, losing his status, possibly going to jail or definitely going to jail, then, this is a time where that is such a hit that suicide really does look like a better option. So, maybe it was a little over the top in terms of how it was played out, but I definitely think that given that time, that's easily something that could have really happened.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And both of you guys brought up it might have been because the rest of the movie was so focused on the day in, day out of police work, detective work, of asking the right questions, asking 1,000 questions to get one answer. But that scene really stood out to me as well. There are certain types of scenes that I'm very hard on, or certain types of tropes that I'm hard on. I'm hard on alcoholism as a reason for why someone is bad in movies. We've covered this a lot on the show, is that it's often just this, just paint that guy as an alcoholic and it makes sense for why he's bad. But one of the things that I generally like to see is suicide or the thought of it done right. And this is where it's like, oh, the way that you just described it, this person is going to lose everything. He's almost more concerned about making sure his secretary isn't crying than his own stakes at the end of this. And just the sudden rush. I mean, he's an old guy. The sudden rush to the window. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is, I only have one shot at this. So he's gonna go for it after such a convincing thing from before.
I love the quote that I think that was Muldoon says, "That's one prescription that never cured anything." Oh no, that's a narrator says that. I think it's like a little dig at him being a doctor. If I have a recommendation, if you like the kind of the New York high society, a film a little bit later, but from that era, 1954 Black Widow, highly recommend it. I've watched it this past year. It definitely is a similar type of plot line. It's a murder mystery, but it's all about the high New York society, a lot of mystery. So,
okay, cool.
Recommend that one. That's kind of in tune with this kind of plot line.
The high drama of it, the emotional peak that scene provides. The first, it actually made me think of it on my first watch through of this was Brian Cox's character in The Ring, when he's got all the toasters around his shoulder, he's standing in the shower. The impactful scenes like that, across genre can be, like a real game changer for the movie. And so I found that there. I wanted to bring up something. Russell, our showrunner, gives us some really interesting info sometimes, but our producer Mark Hellinger made sure to tell us that these actors are really on the streets. And our director, Jules Dassin, was tasked with this tough thing. I got some info on Jules Dassin here, and we covered sort of the style here, but there was something that was dug up that I had to share, is that unbeknownst to our director, Mark Hellinger and Jules Buck actually recut the movie in his absence. Dassin only found out about this recut at the film's premiere, when he saw the highly edited version on the screen. Hellinger, the narrator, died suddenly in 1947, months before the film was premiered. So that was where the director was like, that's not my movie. But the choice led to 2 big award wins and massive praise. I don't watch every movie twice just for the homework. This one was worth a second watch. Right. And I'd say that style is something that really, you said it kind of dated it with the narration, but the more I think on it, that's kind of what makes it special.
Right. And what stands out in this genre, in this era. How terrible would it be to find out that your films was totally recut while you're sitting in your butt at the premiere, then having to get all these awards and you having to bite the bullet? That's got to be tough as an artist.
Yeah, this was mine.
Yeah, that's a great one. It makes me think of getting off the rails again. It makes me think of how Billy Corgan was always unsatisfied with Darcy Retzky's bass playing, and so there's not a single album where it's actually Darcy like playing bass. She played on stage when they do live show, but he would re-record all of her tracks. And that relationship didn't end up too good.
And that didn't work out.
No, it didn't. So I'm unfamiliar with the rest of this director's works, but I did think it was an interesting piece of sort of the history of this movie. We have mentioned a lot of the atmosphere of this movie, specifically with the city. But is there anything else about like a movie like this makes you feel, whether it's a Sunday eggs and bacon movie or whether it's just like I think you had mentioned maybe pre-show with me, Luke, that sometimes a black and white movie you say, oh, I should watch that, but I'm not in the mood for it right now.
Yeah, I think sometimes older movies or movies that you would watch at film school or at a film class that people tell you it's great, or they're on these lists, they're in the books, and sometimes you're like, okay, I'm not ready for like a heavy artist movie or a heavy like well done movie. Like sometimes you're like,
Right.
I don't want to watch Citizen Kane today. I want to watch Beverly Hills Cop 2. That's there's different types of tastes and feelings you get from movies. I think what surprised me about this movie is how fun and funny it is and entertaining it is. It's not actually that it's serious in nature of the plot line and in what's happening, but the characters are fun to watch and to be around and cheer on. So I think that's what surprised me about this movie is I think sometimes you go into these movies of like, okay, like you said, you're doing the homework. Like I know I'm going to learn something. I'm going to be inspired. It's art. It's going to be fascinating. There's going to be things to talk about. But then also to just sit back and be like, this is just a great story and fun movie and fun characters and a good ride. So to have it be both of those things, I think what makes The Naked City a special movie and why we're still watching it and talking about it today.
Yeah, I like the omakase menu, right? I like the nice offering from the chef directly, but I like a greasy cheeseburger too. Did either of you guys see that they had that there's some kind of Brian, you mentioned that the Gentleman series that is kind of spun off from the 2019 Guy Ritchie movie. When I searched to find this movie, there's the Naked City TV show. You guys see this?
Yep. I was going to dive into that at some point. I was like, I got to see how this goes.
Did you check it out, or doesn't it kind of, it really lends itself though to if this movie is going to wrap itself up by saying there's 8 million people on this island and this is just one story, and so visually wrapped up with a ribbon with the paper on the street getting swept up, or put in the bin, is that like I could see the same way that Sin City did a second, like a Dame to Kill For, or like based on all the different Frank Miller stories, I could totally see there being other and here's another story. Would you be interested in seeing like, oh yeah, but Lieutenant Dan is involved in this one?
I would definitely watch another Muldoon movie. Like I would watch a series of Muldoon caper detective films. Like I think his character is so strong. He's not a superhero, but he knows so much and you feel like he's always in control.
And he's got a great sense of humor.
And he's funny. I mean, it goes back to like the shows I grew up watching on basic cable that were 70s and 80s shows like Matlock, and it's like the procedural shows where you have the Rockford Files, these older kind of gentlemen that kind of are never really that
Columbo.
bothered. Yeah, Columbo, Roger Moore era James Bond. You have these wise, strapping gentlemen that are charismatic and well dressed and are never too bothered. They're never really exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
They're never running. Like Muldoon doesn't go on the chase. He like just holds back. I love those kind of characters, and that's maybe just my personal. But I would love to see more Muldoon movies.
Yeah, I think it's. I think you said it, Brian. Like this doesn't get made today in this way. But
no, it's a TV series, and I'm going to give a little bit of a soapbox here. I would rather watch this than 8 hours of like an episodic TV show or a mini series. I'm probably in the minority, but I'd rather watch an hour and 40 detective story than a 10-hour detective story. Like, I know True Detective's really good. First season's amazing. Like there's and there's great Law and Order episodes, but I really like watching a detective film versus a TV series.
Yeah. Or, Brian, you mentioned X-Files with like, hey, Monster of the
Right.
Week is great, right? But
Monster of the Week.
it's the serial of learning. You put all of the behind the scenes stuff for one season, and you've got a thriller that would be on its own. That's what we're interested in. I have one more little piece of Rush trivia for us. Speaking of that movie being very high regarded, The Naked City being as regarded as it was, Dassin wanted a colleague of his, George Baseman, to compose the music, and he did. And it wasn't until after the movie was done that Hellinger hated it. The producer hated the movie. So he actually begged another guy, Miklos Rocha, to come in and do the entire music over, including the chase and the epilogue. So this movie, I mean, I mentioned it, and I'm glad that Russ was telling me, like, you got to talk about this director, but it's almost not his movie anymore.
No, it's the producer. It's been a great film. Great people worked on it, but I did everything. I changed everything. I'm the greatest. Enjoy the film.
That's it right there. That's it. Well, yeah, it is kind of a rocking ride, and the movie has a director, but the producer was really the one jumping in on it. But I want to talk more about the movie, but let's do it in our superlative section. You guys ready?
Ready.
Absolutely.
All right, Luke, let's start with you. Who's the MVP of The Naked City?
I think the MVP...
Before Hellinger like swoops in and changes whatever your choice would be.
Yes.
Who's your MVP?
I think the MVP has to go to William H. Daniels, the cinematographer, and the sound department. I just think movies today don't film this much on location. Definitely not movies that are set in New York. They're shot on a set in Atlanta or in LA or in
Norway,
Bucharest or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think any like modern cinematic feature film would have the guts to shoot this much in New York City. Not many would. Like, you would just budget wise, the time. Like, I think the cinematographer, the sound department, all that crew behind the scenes. Think about how hard it was to do that back then. It would be hard today, but back then even more difficult. They have to be the MVP because the way this movie looks, it's just gorgeous to this day. I remember just watching this movie, taking screenshots, because just like there were so many shots that I was just like, my breath was taken away. And I was also like, how did they do that? Especially back then. So they are my MVPs.
There's others.
They're like the offensive line of filmmaking. You know,
Right.
the cinematographer and the sound department and lighting guys. Like the offensive line is the MVP.
There we go. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Brian, who's your MVP?
So I just don't think this movie would have been nearly as compelling without Barry Fitzgerald. His banter and constant wit and witticisms and wisdom throughout this film are really the driving piece. Even, I remember the line he has with the captain at the very beginning. He's like, "Oh, how about that new kid?" And he goes, "Oh, he's like me before all the mistakes." And he goes, "Oh, nuts! I had high hopes for him." Like that. The back and forths like that were fantastic and very driving part of the movie.
They were, and then now I'm reminded of something else where his office is overlooking the street where there are kids playing, and he's got his window open, and just kind of watching down.
That's a great shot. I love that shot that they like hold on it and they kept it in because it just sets kind of this. It's just this like breath of calm before they get back into the story.
Well, and I feel like over time, something that always happens, at least as a trope in a lot of these crime movies, is when you have the older detective, they're less the sagely mentor. I mean, outside of maybe Rising Sun, they're less the sagely mentor, and they're more the Gary Busey, burnt out, crass. I'm done with my, this is all crap, kid. It'll wear you down too in the end.
I'm
like you usually get that. This
Yeah.
is literally, exactly. This is the sagely wisdom. Like he still has a positive outlook on life. He's just trying to, earn his salary.
Yeah, and he's a
I
widower
don't,
too. We forgot to
yeah,
mention that he's a widower.
yeah, he's shaving in the morning, singing his little Irish, songs and whatnot. And I was just like,
It reminds
it's
you of an
refreshing to have.
Irishman.
Yeah, he's not a drunk. It's just that's you get a lot of these aged detective stereotypes, and he has none of them, and I liked that.
What a great point. And yeah, he even like finishes the lyric of the kids playing double dutch. Like there's a sweetness to him. Speaking of
Yeah.
like the movie introducing all these small vignettes, when he's kind of in his undershirt, like preparing for his day, he's hard boiling some eggs. I just thought, oh, this is just like an apartment shop of some dude. And then, oh, actually, this is who we're following. So that was kind of nice. I'm not going to add too much more. Brian, Barry Fitzgerald as Dan Muldoon is my MVP as well. It's not always that I give sort of the primary actor our biggest accolade, but I will say, if you take the wrap up line, which was there are 8 million stories, this is one of them, I think I would probably say this is not Miss Dexter, the deceased story, Halloran's story, and it's not Niles' story. I'd say this is more Dan Muldoon's story. I don't know if the rest of his 38 years were filled with other successes, but he's so compelling when he's on screen that you kind of want to learn more. How did he get there? Who was your best supporting actor, Luke?
There's a lot of great ones, but I do love Halloran, Don Taylor as Jimmy Halloran. Even though he does play, it seems like a straight-laced Boy Scout character, I think there's a subtle performance of the mentor-mentee relationship and his urge, his fight, and his desire to solve the mystery. And in a lot of, it's not just like the young punk like trying to prove himself. It's more about him trying to learn from Muldoon on the go on the case and try to overcome his doubts and try to solve the crime. Like just him messing with the lamp, like he's really thinking and really trying to solve this case and do anything he can. So I think that kind of goes together with Muldoon as an MVP. You have a great supporting, and they're able to play off each other throughout the film and build that relationship.
What you just said reminded me that so many of these TV shows that follow sort of like crime, serials is all right. You've got. I'm just going to call some names in some shows that I've not even watched, like The Mentalist. Oh, like figure out what you're thinking, or it's like The Good Doctor, the young doctor, where he's like some kind of genius. Or let's go to like with the medical profession, like House, like he's some kind of genius. We get all these instances where people have some kind of superhuman ability to solve the case. Not interesting. This is interesting. This is experience and mentor-mentee, the way you describe. Sometimes you just got to have a guy willing to learn or a gal willing to learn, or that this is the process and I'm going to trust it. And that is, I think, really refreshing. We don't need some super intellect to get there. Brian, who's your best supporting?
My supporting is Dorothy Hart. I really don't think this movie would have had the forgive the double use here, but the heart it did. I mean, you had to have her aloofness, and then her indignation, and then her willingness to be like, you could be a thief, and I'll still stand by you. I'll marry you tonight.
Right.
But when it comes out that he was cheating on her with her friend, that was like the last straw. So you have, and during the whole time he's stealing from her. So I just don't think that there would be the soul of the movie without Dorothy Hart.
Yeah.
And that is why
there's no reason they're doing it without the Dorothy Harts out there. You know what I mean? She gives them a reason, a purpose to their job is to save the Dorothy Harts.
And what a refreshing thing, even among this genre for the time, but obviously for the next 75 years, romantic love is not a part of this movie.
No, not really at all. Yeah.
Because romantic love in movies, there's conflict and a will there, won't there? And in this case, what we have is Halloran and his happy family. The only conflict you have is he actually going to discipline his kid? And their little cute banter over like, I don't have time. Duty calls.
You're a coward.
Yeah, that was great. And I think my laugh out loud movie of the or moment of the movie. My best supporting actor is our liar, Frank Niles. Howard Duff is Frank Niles. I think I don't know. He did mention his character said like, yeah, I've got a lingering knee injury from playing college ball. And I'm like, this guy looks like it. This guy is fit. Not everybody at the time, fitness standards have changed, but he also feels like he could probably hold up in a scrap. That if he's involved in things that are shady, if he is not a successful businessman, he's squandered money, and he's having to like turn tricks to do this stuff, that he is just, it's not just slimy, he's slimy and capable, it would seem. But we don't get to see that. In fact, the only time that we see like there being a fracas, he ends up on the loser's end, needing some cold tea and several Muldoon slaps to wake up. But he seemed like a formidable guy, especially once he makes the turn to, all right, fine, you know some stuff about me, but good luck making any of it stick. Just show me the proof. That is sometimes a stonewall approach that doesn't lead to good things on screen, but I thought it did in this movie. And just same disclaimer I give every week is, sometimes I choose my best supporting actor because that character is written well. And I think it was here too. Luke, who or what is a hidden gem from this movie?
I'm going to go with Anne Sargent as Mrs. Halloran. Again, I've said it before. Love these two. Would love to see a 1950s sitcom of their life.
That'd be nice.
And try to discipline their kid. I would have loved some more screen time with her.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good.
That's my hidden gem. Just that the Hollorans just living their life.
Yeah, I dream of Halloran. Yeah, Halloran in the city. Bryan, what's your hidden gem?
It's not hidden, but it's the way it was filmed. I feel like the real kind of, I'm just going to call it the gem of the movie, is the different way in which they filmed it, and it really added a lot. As you talk about like 13th Man. Like the city of New York is the 13th man in this film.
Yeah, good call out for that. And yeah, it's the gem, not the hidden gem, we'll say. Well, I'm breaking the rules a little bit.
I mean, they call it out at the very beginning, so it's like you can't be too hidden.
This is a story about.
But I do think that it gets maybe lost a little bit over the way. You stop thinking about it as a story about New York, and it's a story about people. So.
Yeah,
I do think that it's good to bring it back around to New York City in the end.
What do you think, Garza? A crowded bus? That'd be a good way to get away. Oh, you better slow down.
Oh, too bad. And you can't wait till the next one.
Can we just say that Garza killing the
wasn't going to bring it up yet.
Service dog? Or were you going to bring it up?
No. Say what you're going to say.
I just think like that was us, the movie telling us like this guy is a bad guy and deserves to die. I was like, dang.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it would be important is that here in this instance, I know we've talked about it before, Bryan, but like I think I told you about, there is a website called doesthedogdie.com.
Right.
If you see a movie
I'm very familiar.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the most, not to go super off the rails on this segue part, because Russ actually thought this was going to be a deal breaker for me, because he was like, oh God, there's a dog that dies in this. Fry's going to hate it.
No way.
And, but yeah, he texted me that. He was like, you're all right with that movie, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about that.
But the one of the policemen shows up and like looks at the dog, and I think like picks up a paw and it like drops it, like confirms it's dead.
Yeah.
Were we in the mind space at the time to have devoted 3 seconds for the dog to shake its tail, or to make it like a cheap animatronic to show that like the dog isn't dead or something? I don't know. It was something that crossed my mind when I watched it. It's like, we have this. Or is there something earlier in the movie where our Garza has an encounter with a dog, and it's maybe like a clue, or it's just like, oh, this is something we know, or maybe
foreshadow. Because killing the dog really is the worst thing he does in this film.
Yeah, definitely. That was like, he deserves to die. Like at first, he's compelling as a character. Like I kind of like him wrestler. He's compelling as a bad guy. Looks good in the suit. And no, that was like, nope, this guy's not redeemable.
Yeah.
But to what you were saying, Dustin, about does the dog die? The most compelling instance of that I've ever had in film was the first 3 minutes of Prey. It's the most recent Predator movie, and she's like running through the woods with her dog. And I was like, pause, doesthedogdie.com. I'm not watching any more of this. It was like, yep, Predator kills. I'll be like, nah, I'm done.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Not even.
It's a great movie, though.
It was so important that I find that out that I literally posted on Facebook. Hey guys, just so you know, this movie was awesome. I checked beforehand. Nothing. I even put the dog in my post by name.
No, it's an important thing, and I'm glad the thing exists. While we're talking about movie websites, there's another one that apparently gives you the exact perfect time to go to the bathroom for new releases. Like this is the moment. Like this is the moment that you will miss the least.
That's very helpful. That's getting more helpful as the years go on and movies get longer for theater movies. Like, can we just go back to the old-fashioned intermission? Like, I'd be okay with that.
That'd be nice. We live in a world of technology.
I truly have never forgiven my wife for Marley and Me.
I
refuse. I refuse.
Well, my hidden gems. The first one I'll keep very brief. It's they're doing a lot of detective work inside of the crime scene room. One guy is like blowing on this like long rod, and they even ask him like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm doing my job. I'm investigating." But there's a guy doing a sketch of the room.
Oh, I love that.
That was such ingress and egress. He's almost like creating like he's doing something that might be in like a cool military movie. They send out like a drone that quickly scans the room. But in this case, it was like, oh, this is a regular part of investigation. I thought that was pretty neat. The second one is very soon afterward, they find a couple hairs in the rug. And what Muldoon does is he kind of he walks behind the housekeeper, who we've already been told is 42 years old and has never married. And so he like really quickly like plucks like a hair off of her head. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I was just admiring your hair." All it takes is one compliment from a man to a woman in this time frame, and she gets like the doe eyes. Like,
oh, yeah, I would love a compliment from Muldoon. Now that's all I gotta say.
I thought those were good hidden gems. Let's blast through a couple more of these superlatives. What is your recast here, Luke? This is a tough one. It's if you had to, and you do.
You could recast the Dorothy Hart character or Dorothy Hart with like a bigger star of like you could throw Ingrid Bergman or Rita Hayworth in there. I don't think it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I like having more subtle casts where it's not like a big bombastic star, and she was a star in her time. Probably the one that I would is just like the parents, which that might be coming back in another superlative. Sure. I thought the parents were one of the toughest parts. The deceased parents were the most goofy characters in the film, especially when they say, "I wish she hadn't been born beautiful," which was I was like, "Oh, that is rough parenting there. Wish she wasn't born beautiful."
Not a lot of time to kind of create any character for them on screen.
Yeah, it was a little like over the top, I think.
Mm-hmm. Brian, who are you recasting in this movie?
So I know they kind of did the narrator as the producer, and I don't know exactly how I would have rewritten it, but I would love to have seen the narrator be City of New York. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
like the voice of the city.
This is Robert Moses. Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure how
like
to
their first person, like New York, my you know, it's a dark day in my life.
Every city has a soul, and I'm the city. You know, I don't know. It's one of those things where
I know
like,
what
I
we're
feel
looking
like
for. Yeah, but my mind goes to something stupid, which is like, well, inside of me are all of these little guys.
No, but I'm just thinking, like, I feel like goofier lines, like, not that way. Like, all of that could come from the city speaking for itself, not a third wall beneficiary.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I like that idea.
That is really good.
That's kind of where I was trying to suss out exactly how I'd write it. And I think you only need maybe at the least 2 lines, something at the very beginning. It's like, this is me, New York City, like at the end. So I feel like you could do it, and you could do it subtly. But also it would yeah, it would enrich some of those goofier parts in it to be like, there's a reason I'm omniscient in this, and it's not because I'm the person making the film. It's because I am the city with which the film is about.
That is very cool. Yeah. Yeah. Don't go that way. Never go that way. I'll take you straight to that
There's
castle.
a trick stare. There's a trick stare right there. Oh, you hit it anyway.
I promise my recast is not based on me watching that terrible Holmes and Watson movie. But did you guys ever see Gangs in New York?
Yes, of course.
Do you remember that John C. Reilly plays kind of a tough gang beat 'em up guy who ends up being? I would like to see, if this movie were remade in the last 20 years, that tough fit John C. Reilly as our Willie Garza. Because
that's a good like for like.
Okay.
That. I think he could be, and there's other things I would want to say about it later, and I will, but I think he could be menacing, especially with his facial hair and his kind of wild curly hair. Being involved in the wrestling scene, or being maybe like part of the immigrant population, he could fit that really well. But I won't linger on it.
I want Billy Connolly in for Harry Fitzgerald.
Yep. That's good.
That would
work really well.
Just that real super strong, awesome Irish accent. Like his Irish accent is just like
perfect.
What is the best shot of the movie, Luke?
There's so many good ones. So many great shots throughout the film. I love the staircase shot where you see above the staircase. It actually reminds me of The Fugitive with Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford.
Da-na-na.
Where he yells his name. Very similar type of shot. I think that's beautiful. But one that's more subtle, more of a hidden gem, is when Halloran goes to talk to one of the cops on a beat near one of the elevated trains.
He goes down the stairs,
Goes down the stairs, and then he talks to him. Both going down the stairs and talking to him. It's at night. I do not know how they shot that, because it's definitely at night. It's not rear projection. Like, I don't know how they did it. Like, and captured the audio and made it, like, I know they probably had some big lights that were just like, back then you had to have just ginormous lights.
Yeah,
but I could not tell if, especially when you're seeing both of them talking, if that was a rear projection in the background. And I don't think it was, because it looked real in the trains moving.
Big lights to be able to capture it on film, but also to be able to see the 3 individual bulbs of the hanging lamps above the stairs. That was striking to me as well. Yeah.
And you felt like you were in the city. Like, it felt like, oh, you just got off the train. Like, it just felt so grounded and real. So that's a very subtle shot out of a movie of endless gorgeous shots. But that's one that stood out to me.
The style of that scene reminds me of the movie poster for The Exorcist, of him standing outside the house.
Right.
Brian, what is your best shot?
I like the very beginning of the film, but not the initial daytime shots, the city that never sleeps angles. I have never wanted to spend like 2 weeks doing nothing but enjoying the ambiance of nighttime New York. Like, whether it's on a deck or through a window or open window, just something, just listening to the noise and the life of a city as it sleeps or doesn't sleep.
Yeah, and beautifully put. That is, I agree with you. I didn't think I wanted that, or had never wanted that before. A movie like this can introduce that to you. My best shot is it is our Halloran and one other detective going up the construction elevator to meet Garza's brother. That is done with, like, the cameras on the elevator. And
yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't believe it. That was a jaw drop moment for me in the film. I was like, they did that?
Yeah. And it looked
how
as
and
real.
Why? It's just crazy that they did that. But they wanted it to feel like, oh, that's a construction worker in New York. I get it.
And it was for a 30-second moment where
I know. It's crazy.
The brother of Garza was like, yeah, that no-gooder. Hey, if you do catch him, throw away the key.
Throw away the key. There is no job in the world that would ruin me more than construction worker at that time in New York.
Yeah,
Not only do I have god awful balance,
oh yeah,
like I am deathly afraid of heights where I'm not hooked into something.
Yeah.
And oh my God, anytime I see it's like, yeah, construction workers in New York and they're on like an I-beam, 500 stories up. And I'm just like, ah.
I'm not a construction worker, but I do physical labor a lot. I've done 2 things this year that would be awful for you to know. I won't tell you what I did this year, but they were very high. And
OSHA's not listening, I don't think.
Hey, we just gotta
what was that movie? What was the movie that came out recently where the girls climb up the radio tower and the ladder breaks?
I don't know. If it's
I know
recent,
what
I
you're talking
won't.
about.
That is the epitome of anxiety. Like that, if you want to give me a heart attack, just be like, tie me up in a room and make me watch that movie. I was like, like even the preview, I was like,
Nope.
What is the best scene for you, Luke?
The best scene outside of the final 20 minutes, the chase scene on the bridge, I go back to it when Halloran is fiddling with the lamp and Muldoon's cleaning the pipe. I just love that office scene. Any of the office scenes, like even when Muldoon has his like display up and he's drawing on the chalkboard, which I'm like, I need a chalkboard in my office, just like sitting back here, so I could just use chalk.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically the one where the Halloran's about to kind of go on the chase, like he's following that last lead. I think that's such a turning point in the movie where it's like, again, I talk about like the highs and lows, kind of the crescendos, that heartbeat of the movie. Like you're on a kind of like a slowed down beat, and then like Muldoon gives Halloran the green light, pun intended, and he goes. So I just love that scene. I think it captures both characters, and then it sets us off on our chase.
Yeah, great choice. And mine is very similar because it's in the exact same room. Bryan, what's your best scene?
So I know a little bit's been said about the parents, and I understand from a distance from point A to point Z of their purpose in this movie. My favorite scene of the movie, though, is the detective with the family at the docks at the very end.
Yeah.
It's a very emotional scene with an indictment on the same city that you're trying to decide whether or not it's being portrayed as a positive or a negative, but it's simply being portrayed for the unapologetic thing that it is.
Yeah, and I think we were spoiled for choices with a lot of good scenes. For me, it is the part of the subtle interrogation where Muldoon gets Niles to admit that Stoneman is Henderson. That was the name. Henderson.
Spaceman.
Yeah, Dr. Spaceman. Is that he gives him so many lines that like, hey, you finally decided to get brave. What's going to keep you from going all the way? And I got you for 20 years. It's just like it's not even a question. So you figure out how you handle it from here, and I just thought that was really well done. And it got us to our next several scenes. Okay, Luke, a wardrobe or a makeup moment stands out to you as the best?
Probably anything Dorothy Hart wears. Her being really the main female character in this film. She has some amazing outfits, just striking outfits.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of great suits and fedoras, of course, that I've mentioned, but whatever she wears was just stood out in the film as just gorgeous and stylistic of the time.
Bryan, what about you?
Oh, it's Halloran's wife's sailor girl outfit that she wears when he shows up at the house. Like, first thing I thought, I was like, can I still buy one of those, and would my wife wear it?
Well, have you fallen short on your disciplinary duties for Avon? Because if you haven't,
you got to be discipline.
You coward!
We're going 3 for 3. I'm going with one of our female actors here, which is Ruth's dress when she comes back to her mother's house, and when they're already talking to her.
Yeah,
it's got this incredible silhouette that yes, fashion at the time almost required the women to be at like waif level status, but this in particular, with it had some like pointed shoulders on it. It was just it created a striking silhouette, and I really liked it. All right, a couple more. This is a big one though. Luke, you got to change one thing about this movie. What do you change?
It's gonna be the parents. I already talked about it, but yeah, the parents either recast or just adjust the dialogue a little bit. But again, that shot at the end is so great too with them. But I think just the over dramatization of the mother crying and stuff that felt a little aged. But other than that, not much to change.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe who knows if it was the director or I guess our real power here, our producer, if he really cared about it so much, but it was still part of the goal of, well, of course they would talk to the family. We can't leave out that they would talk to the family. So
Right.
It had to be there. Brian, what are you changing?
Actually, I went with part of the parent scene in this. I know it was probably indicative of the times, but I thought the whole I hate her leading up to the oh baby, my baby conclusion was I understand initial reaction and not disbelief that she's dead and anger. Like there are some stages of grief in there that, there's some denial and whatnot at play in there, but it was just a little too much contrast between the two pieces in too little amount of time.
Yeah. I had mentioned mine already, which is that I think Garza needs to be fleshed out way more.
Yeah.
Now, the movie didn't need it. And I'm not saying that we need to take advice from that Coen masterpiece of No Country for Old Men, but focusing on POV or the story, since these are interweaved stories of New York City, focusing on that for him way earlier than we really get, instead of just that one little snippet, something about him, I don't know, in the middle of his normal crime routine.
Because we could have gotten him, we could have known who he was, and it wouldn't have affected us, right? Because
right,
as a viewer, had him doing anything with jewelry because that was sort of a thing that had to mature over time.
But even if we know before the detectives know, that's fine, and common for the audience to know before the principal crime solvers know, but.
Right, I feel like this is the kind of the movie that's all about the criminal or the solving a crime process. So I feel like they wanted you to know as they knew. I like maybe roughing somebody up or being known as a hood or something like that. But I feel like you can't really add anything about the primary jewelry piece until they naturally figure that out.
You might get something where he's playing the harmonica near some of the kids, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we know that guy. We know Willie." And then, like, as he turns the corner, Willie. He kicks a dog. To where the dog has comeuppance for him.
Don't need any more animal cruelty in the movie.
Oh. All right, fine. I wasn't adding that in for the cruelty part. All right, let's finish it out with our best quote. Luke, what's the best quote of the movie?
I already said there's so many good Muldoon ones, but I really like at the end of the film, instead of chasing him up the tower of the bridge, which is any action movie, the hero is going to chase him up, especially the young guy, and just try to tackle him or convince him not to jump. But I really like how Muldoon's like, we want no dead heroes.
Yep.
And that feels very accurate to the whole picture of this film of it's grounded in real police work. Like the experienced cop is like, you don't need to follow him. He's like, he's trapped himself.
Yeah.
We don't want dead heroes. Which is, I'm like, that's the cop in action. Like they don't want to like jump off the bridge with the guy, or they don't want to risk themselves. They're not Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, like trying to scale a bridge just for the glory.
He doesn't have a diffusable bomb on him that you need to go get. Like
it's like very much like, we chased him across the city. We found him. He's stuck. He can either jump or like it's his decision.
He has the detonators.
Yeah. Which I love those movies, but I really like it. It felt grounded in the movie.
Brian, what's your best quote?
I bounce around between a couple here, but I think my favorite quote is the antithesis to what they start off by doing, and I think it's the dad that says, "We don't like this place, this fine city."
Yeah, that is a good quote.
The sneer he puts on fine is great.
Yeah, he does a good job.
It was hard not to go with a Muldoon one. I already mentioned one earlier, but I'm going to go with a Garza one. which is after he is kind of sizing up Halloran, and the jig is already up. He knew that he wasn't with the hospital right away.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
So after he has him turn around, he's like, I don't. That's the way they get you. You think I'm dumb? I'm smart. Killing a cop is that's the way I really get sent up for a long time. All I got to do is put you to sleep. So he hits him and he says, "That was a rabbit punch, copper, and it's strictly illegal." That was so good and cheesy, but good. Yeah. Okay. Well, before we get to our full rating and recommendation, Luke, remind our audience where we can hear more from you on the Least Important Things podcast.
Yeah, search Least Important Things wherever you get your podcasts. You can go to leastimportantthings.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Luke H. Ferris. Luke H. Ferris as an H as in ham, or Least Important Things on TikTok. So please check us out. We've got the rewatch series, and then we have the storytelling episodes, 10 to 20 minutes, easy to listen to, and then more long form like we're doing here. I'm going to do 4.5. It's not a 5 because it's not absolutely perfect. There's a few little things that we talked about of it aging, but overall, just an incredible film. So 4.5, if that's allowed, if you guys are okay with that.
So I gave this a solid 4-star rating. I think this movie broke a lot of ground. I think there are a lot of aspects to this movie that future films didn't take from it, and they should have. A lot of pieces where, tropes in the future get made about police officers and how they import themselves, and they probably could have watched this and made their films better by learning from it. And I just think this is an all-around great movie.
It is a great movie. It's a great enough movie. I'm going to give it a 4 myself. I probably would have given it 4.5 if it was judging it on my second watch. Whenever I need a second watch to give it a little bit more oomph or a little bit more, my eyes were open more, I keep that in mind. I think about how I would recommend this to somebody, and I think there are plenty of people that I would recommend this to. This movie wouldn't be for them. That you need to have an understanding of the history, and in general, when it comes to movies and their historical impact on things, I try to remove that from my enjoyment. That being said, for being a 4-star movie, this was great. I would watch it again. And I agree with what you were saying, Brian, is like, this is like example setting for certain things. And its lack of others is a refreshing positive for me. The idea that Ruth was not tempting Halloran in any way, that was nice. Yeah, we like that from our femme fatale movies. That's not what this is. So this was a 4-star movie for me. So this movie got some really great marks. And speaking of movies with great marks, I've got several options for next week, Brian. Warm up your singing voices. We're going to do a little musical next week. I'm going to describe 3 musical movies for you, and you just tell me what we're going to do. Option number 1, from 2004, The Phantom of the Opera. A young soprano becomes the obsession of a disfigured and murderous musical genius who lives beneath the Paris Opera House. Option number 2, Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, from 2007. The legendary tale of a barber who returns from wrongful imprisonment in 1840s London, bent on revenge for the rape and death of his wife, and resumes his trade while forming a sinister partnership with his fellow tenant, Mrs. Lovett. And option number 3, from 2014, this first year we could do it, Into the Woods. A witch tasks a childless baker and his wife with procuring magical items from classic fairy tales to reverse the curse put on their family tree. Brian, what's it going to be?
I feel like we got to go with some Sweeney Todd on this. Get a little murder going.
Get a little murder going, following up this murder movie with a very different style of murder movie and a higher body count, I believe. Well, a special thanks, of course, to you, Brian, as always. And Luke, thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure, gentlemen. It was so much fun chatting and getting into this movie. So I love what you're doing with the show. Keep it up.
Thank you very much. And thank you, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Hey, producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free. We invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is much appreciated and will go towards making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Brian?
You know what he'll do when he comes back? Beat my teeth out, then kick me for mumbling.